Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming today. We have some Flutter stickers right here behind the projector if you want to get that now or at the end. We also are going to be doing some live programming, so if, we encourage you to scoot forward so you guys can read the screen. Here with me I have Randal Schwartz and Wm Leler, and we're going to be talking about, or they're going to be talking about native mobile application development with Flutter.
Cool.
You're more than welcome.
Thank you. So as he said, I'm Randal Schwartz. I'm probably best known for Perl, all those years of Perl that I've contributed to and still contribute to.
How many people still have a copy of the Camel books?
Yeah, me too, actually. I have one at home. So, but many of you may know me for my recent work of doing the podcast called Floss Weekly. How many people here have listened to Floss Weekly? A good portion of them. Yay, cool. I've been doing that for 10 years now, which has been really cool. But now for the disclaimer. I only just started playing with Flutter maybe 4 months ago. So that's why I have a Flutter expert here to help me out in case there's any questions.
I'm only here for moral support.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
anyway.
He doesn't have any morals, so I don't know how to support it.
Nothing to support. Right?
So my name is Wm Leler. I am a senior software engineer at Google. I'm on the Flutter project. I'm also the developer advocate, which means my job is to get developers what they need from Google. So, and I love this job, actually. It's the best job I've had at Google. So, and I like working on Flutter. So anyway, I'll be interrupting him from time to time when he says something that I don't agree with, even if it's right. So, we'll see what happens.
So now in the program, you may see the words cross-platform application development. And Wim always cringes when he sees that. And you'll see in the later part of the talk why he cringes when that's sort of the primary focus.
Let me ask you,
Yeah.
How many people when they see something that says cross-platform mobile development go, yeah, I've seen crap like that before, right? Yeah, now you know why I cringe.
I know, right? Because they cringe, right?
Yeah.
Well, this is not that, and you'll see. This is definitely not that. So let's go ahead and get started. So I'm going to start by talking about an analogy. And the analogy in here in particular is the evolution away from vendor lock-in. Some of us are old enough, I can see around here, there's a few gray beards, are old enough to remember the ancient operating systems that were provided by the vendor and generally closed source with a few exceptions. Some of the very earliest vendors actually provided source code so people could do some of their own support and get feedback about it. But then we have this nice window in the middle where everybody was closed source. And then of course came along the Floss revolution, free, libre, open source software, the BSDs, the Linuxes, and others. And what was great about that is that the customers could then fix their own code when it was broken. They could extend it. They could modify the operating system or even port it to new hardware. So this was quite a step up. And share their code freely with others. They could start creating communities and building on each other's work. But more importantly, for this talk, is that Linux became an API. You write it once for a Linux, and then it would run on extremely varied hardware, all the way from single board micro devices all the way up to supercomputers. So Linux unified the API space for writing portable software. It became that API. And why this is important today is we're going to talk about the mobile space. So the mobile story is similar. For a decade, the smartphone vendors have been like the early computer vendors. Phone apps had to be written with vendor-supplied tool chains that varied between platforms. So if you wanted to code for iOS, you had to learn an entirely different system from coding for Android. Vendor-chosen languages that varied between platforms. So you'd have to learn Java on one side, Objective-C on the other. And APIs that vary greatly as more releases come out. So you'd have to keep upcoding or providing shims, providing compatibility macros, things like that. And the views and the gestures were also decided by the vendor. Everything was according to the way they wanted it. And so what did you want to do if you wanted to kind of cover most of the market? Okay, if you wanted to release for iOS and you wanted to release for Android, you either had to have people that knew both or you had to have separate teams. Both of those are difficult. Requiring specialized skills means that, you could only hire smart people, right? Or separate teams means you've got twice the labor and they might not necessarily talk to each other very well. And your applications, once you publish them, might not look the same on both platforms. So you'd have a look that it looks like on Android and a look that it looks like on iOS. Then along came Flutter. And suddenly the game has changed. So what is Flutter? Spoken briefly, Flutter is a mobile app SDK. It's complete. Batteries included, we'll talk more about that later. Framework, engine, widgets, and tools and tooling. And it gives developers an easy and productive way to deploy beautiful apps. It's currently in, 3 weeks ago, I would have said alpha, but it's now in beta. A lot of noise for that, for iOS and Android. It's also used for Fuchsia, which we don't know about anything except that there's a Git repo, and I think it runs on a Chromebook, at least on one of the demos I saw. And some people are actually also working on Flutter desktop apps, similar to using Electron to create beautiful apps that are cross-platform. Dart is actually the language of Flutter. We'll see a lot of Dart examples when I do the live demo. But the other thing that's nice about Dart is you can use that to build web and server applications. And I talked about Dart last year here, but Dart is the language that's underlying all of Flutter and makes it possible. What's nice about that is you learn Dart once, and now you've got 5 platforms, counting Fuchsia, which we don't know what it is, but it might get out there someday.
And don't ask me any questions about it.
He can't talk about it either. They made him drink the Kool-Aid before he came here. So what does Flutter do? So for users, it allows you to have beautiful application UIs. They're really, really slick. You'll see during the demo just how nice and pretty they are. For developers, it lowers the bar to entry for building mobile apps. I have a bullet later that I'll spoil the surprise now. I'm actually thinking of doing mobile apps now. And I never wanted to go into the Learn Objective-C or Java, and now I don't have to.
So he actually built a mobile app, so he can't say he's going to. He actually has done this. So.
I built the demo that we're going to see in a few minutes.
Yeah.
It also speeds up the development cycle. We'll talk about and demonstrate this thing called hot reload. It also reduces the cost and complexity of making an app for both platforms. And it permits a single mobile app dev team for both iOS and Android. For designers, it helps deliver original design vision without compromises. You don't have to get your beautiful design to fit into the iOS widgets and the Android widgets, the OEM widgets we call them. It also allows rapid prototyping. You can change the design rapidly without waiting for a long compile and deploy cycle. So what do you need to start playing with Flutter? Flutter, again, uses Dart as the primary development language. Dart's a really easy language to learn. It's modern, it's strongly typed, very familiar constructs. If you know Java or you know C#, you'll probably drop right into Dart, and that's not going to be your barrier. Classes, methods, variables, complex data structures, has generics, has type inference, so you can get away with minimal type annotations. Obviously imperative programming, but also functional programming, streams, futures, immutable objects. You really don't need any prior mobile experience, as I can attest, because I'm building stuff with Flutter now. Yeah, there's my bullet there. See, I'm even doing mobile development now. So even people with very little programming experience seem to be productive rapidly. You had like a figure for that, like 3 weeks or something? Wasn't there a figure that you were saying at one point?
Yeah, no, internally, Google's been using Flutter for a while now, and there was a large internal project that was using Flutter, and because they originally had an Android app, and they wanted to get an iOS app, so they were trying to figure out what to do, and they said, we're going to have to hire a bunch of iOS programmers, and we're Google, right? So, so we talked them into using Flutter, and they monitored the whole development cycle very closely. And what they found is that they could hire new programmers and get them fluent and productive on Dart and Flutter in 3 weeks. And that compares to what they'd measured before of bringing people up to speed on just Android. Now, that's okay, 5 to 3 weeks, that sounds good, but it's even better when you realize that at the end, they also had an iOS app for free. Right? So they estimate they got about 4x productivity increase just by switching.
Amazing stuff. What kind of apps can you build? It's optimized for 2D mobile apps that want to run on iOS and Android, and it's capable of brand-first designs. What that means is that a designer can control pixel for pixel everything that's on the screen. So you can make an app that looks absolutely identical across both platforms. We'll see how that works in a few minutes. Or not, or you can make it mimicking the stock platform look and feel, like the Android bounce at the end and the iOS backing by swiping horizontally, things like that. You can build full-featured apps, including native services, access to the camera, access to geolocation, network, storage, third-party SDKs, and more. So you have full access to everything. Who uses it? It's completely open source. It's hosted on GitHub. All the work's being done out in public, including the bug tracker, all that stuff. It's using GitHub as GitHub. There's not a secret repo somewhere else that then only gets pushed every once in a while, like some of the people that I've interviewed.
At least not that they've told me about.
Okay, yeah. Well, then I don't know either, right? It was originally developed, obviously, and still heavily supported by Google, but we're seeing more and more community uptake. There are a lot of people building third-party tools, more publications being used. So, is this going to stick around? Well, nobody can say, but Google already uses Flutter to build business-critical apps for iOS and Android.
Actually, let me give you an example of that. So AdWords, which is where the majority of Google's revenue comes from, is written in Flutter. Okay, so no, Flutter's not going anywhere, I promise you.
Yep. But you work for Google. So anyway, so it's also the store manager for Google Shopping Express and a growing number of internal Google projects, yes. And there are literally hundreds of apps in the iOS and Android store already that are using Flutter, even though Flutter was only in alpha 2 weeks ago. So people are taking the jump, trying it out, liking it, pushing stuff to the app stores. In fact, you may have heard of Hamilton, that musical. The app for it, the official app in iOS and Android, is completely in Flutter.
And they built that app from when they first found out about Flutter. It took them 3 months, and then they shipped an app. They had a hard deadline for this, and they were able to ship apps on both iOS and Android, and it was featured as a good app in both web stores. Okay.
Is it production ready? Well, Flutter's not quite 1.0, but remember what I just said on the last slide. People are already using it and pushing it out. And the reason it's not 1.0 yet is that it's tied to the Dart 2 release, and that's in, like, I guess what we call it late beta. Yeah. So it's coming out soon.
There's a few things that aren't quite there yet. Like, there's a guy in the audience I'm going to embarrass now, who's working on an app that needs accessibility. And we're working on accessibility right now, and we're like really happy to have somebody who's going to work with us to, get features that work the way he wants them. So there's a few things that we're still cleaning up. That's why it's beta.
Yep. API is pretty stable. Again, some might change. It's used extensively inside Google, as we've been alluding to, and he just mentioned accessibility. And the nice thing is, since it's all being done in the public on GitHub, file a GitHub issue if something doesn't work yet. They're very eager to figure out what to do to support the community better. So they're watching the GitHub issues very carefully. Or fix it and submit a pull request. It's all open source. Maybe you have something you can contribute to make it there. It's used by a lot of people. You want to go through the list?
Yeah, I mean,
you don't have to.
Posse's the one that wrote the app for Hamilton. You know who Google is. AppTree is an interesting one just because they're actually doing an enterprise app. So they have a very large enterprise app. And they actually have done not only their iOS and Android, they actually had an iOS and an Android app, which they had written native, and they threw it away and rewrote it all in Flutter. Because what they found is they couldn't make changes fast enough, right? They actually had a year's worth of work to do to get all the platforms up to the same thing. And so at this point, they now have it in Flutter for iOS, Android, and web. 70% of the code is shared between web and the iOS, Android ones. And they say they're 3 times more productive. So without hiring, without tripling their workforce, they're actually doing better than they were before.
Now, how many people in here have done mobile development before? Wow, good turnout.
How many people tore their hair out while they were doing it?
How many people used a cross-platform solution and were happy with it? See.
Okay.
Now I'm about to explain why Flutter is not that. So, for those of you who haven't done mobile development, this is sort of how it looks on the inside. You write the code in green. You're talking through APIs to the OEM widgets, that's like the iOS buttons and the Android buttons as they're shipped by the platform. That then talks to the canvas, which is the actual screen, and also takes and records in events and passes it back up to your code. And your code also talks to the sort of environmental stuff, the location, audio, camera, and so on. So that's a traditional app. Now, the problem with this is you write it for iOS, that big blob of green is in Objective-C or Swift, and you write it for Android, and the big blob is totally in a totally different language, Java or now Kotlin. So people didn't want to have to write two sets of code. So along came the first sort of level of cross-platform, web views. So instead of writing your app in nice languages, you got to write in JavaScript.
Oh, don't be too mean about it.
Oh, okay, right.
JavaScript.
It's gotten us a long way. But what you were doing with your JavaScript is manipulating the DOM for a web view. So you were limited to the easy sorts of things that you can do with a web view. Now, the web views are very flexible, but there's still a lot of math involved sometimes to do beautiful animations or things like that. And you also, to be able to talk to the services, you had to have some sort of bridge. So events coming in from, say, the sensors had to go through a bridge, be turned into JavaScript events, and it all had to go through, there's the thing. And as you might imagine, there's some impedance mismatch in both directions here, because you're having to convert everything to JavaScript, and JavaScript needs to control everything. So people said, no, let's go a better way. Let's go back to using the OEM widgets, so we've got a lot more flexibility, a lot more native thing. And now they had to have a bridge that both JavaScript could call to move around the OEM widgets, and again, the same bridge coming back from the services. And this would be like React Native. Would this be close to that?
This is exactly React Native. Yeah.
Okay. Now, that sucks less, but you're still writing in JavaScript.
See, he's meaner than even I am, right? In that I actually think React Native is pretty cool. What they did was a really brilliant idea, but there's still problems with it. And he's mentioned one of them, which is this idea of the bridge. And a lot of the React Native people we talk to say, yeah, that's a big problem because you can't talk over the bridge that often, or else things start getting janky, right?
Yep.
So he's going to talk about how Flutter gets around this. So I'll shut up now.
Okay. So here's Flutter. Here's the structure that it is. Notice on the right-hand side we have neither WebView nor OEM widgets. That's because the code that draws the widgets in Flutter is in Dart. And it's open source and exposed, and you can extend it and customize it and modify it.
And it's in your application.
Yeah.
Right? You control it.
Right. And so the native code there is written in Dart, so that's where you do most of your coding. You use an IDE to write the code in Dart. But then you push a button, and that code gets converted to native ARM code.
Right.
There's no VM, no JVM, nothing. You're actually running high speed. And this allows the Dart code, once translated to ARM code, be very flexible, fluid, speedy, everything you'd want. So again, here it is in words. So again, Flutter does not use WebView. It doesn't use the OEM widgets. It's Dart all the way down. So we don't have that bandwidth issue, that impedance mismatch issue, because Dart's in control of everything.
So it's Dart all the way down?
Yep.
Like turtles?
Yep.
Okay, good.
So there's no penalty again for going from inputs to the app code to the rendering engine. Internally at the lowest layer, we'll see a picture of this in a minute, Flutter uses Skia from Chrome to do the rendering and to render its own widgets. That means that the widgets are all written in Dart, which is nice. There is a thin layer of C++ at the bottom to talk to the native apps.
Mm-hmm. And Skia is written in C++ as well.
And so Dart code also handles all the compositing, all the gestures, all the animations, all the frameworks. And what that also means is you can inspect how this animation works and say, no, I want it to start slightly different, subclass it, and use yours. It's all Dart all the way down. And the cross-platform look, it feels easily provided, again, or you can ask the interface, am I running on iOS, am I running on Android, and select different widgets for, depending on the platform. So you can actually ask, but by default, it just looks the same. So this is a better diagram of what everything I just said in text. So we have that bottom layer, C++. We have, and that's Skia and the Dart runtime engine and text. And then the foundation, the next level up.
That's what people usually think of as the framework. That's the foundation of it.
Right, right. And then all the animation, painting, gestures, rendering, farther up, widgets. And by default, it sort of uses material widgets most naturally. But again, there are some Cupertino, that's iOS, but iOS is hard to type in a camel case language, so they picked Cupertino.
You don't have to explain that. Everybody knows what Cupertino is.
I know, but they know where it is. They know why it's there, but they don't know why it's not iOS, right?
Okay.
Okay. What's great about this is all of this is pluggable. I can put in a different way to do gestures. I can put in a different way for things to get painted. I can add animations. I can do whatever I want there.
So everything in this diagram is replaceable. If you were crazy, you could replace Skia, right? Because it's all in your thing. They're layered, so you can go as far down as you want. You know, what we're going to show you today is replacing widgets, but you could I've written gestures for this and, you know, stuff like that. So it's kind of neat that you can do all this stuff.
What do you get with the download? Heavily optimized, mobile-first, 2D rendering engine, excellent text support, not tech support.
Good tech support, too.
It's tech support, yeah, it does that, too. A very modern reactive-style framework, rich set of widgets for both Android and iOS. And here's something that's sort of bizarre. Because the material widgets are actually in Dart and ship with Dart, you could actually ship material apps to phones that were shipped even before material was a concept. You can actually have material all the way back.
Right, so let me expand on that just a little bit.
Yep.
The whole idea is because you're not using the platform, you're not limited by what the software is on the phone, right? All that Flutter needs is a canvas to render to and, you know, getting gestures and service, well, not gestures, but, you know, events back. So, yes, you can write a material app, and it will be a material app on a phone that was shipped, you know, like 2 years before material was even thought of. So
Yeah.
you don't have to worry. And that also helps a lot with testing because, you know, like in the past, I've had to like test on like 20 different phones just to get an idea. And then even then, after you ship it, somebody says, oh, this doesn't work very well on such and such a phone.
Good question here.
Yeah.
Does it currently, or will it run on a desktop with Linux or?
Google's not doing that,
Yeah,
but some people are working on
I'm
it.
going to answer it.
Okay.
So he's asking whether it'll run on a desktop. Yeah, we've done that. It's not something that we're working on right now. There's no reason why it can't.
It just needs a canvas.
Yeah, I mean, we're focusing on mobile just because mobile is such a mess right now. And, you know, but there's nothing stopping it from working on other things. But even more interesting than desktop to us is, I mean, if you look around, you realize that almost everything has a screen on it now. You get in a car, it has a screen. There's not good rendering libraries for those screens. And so we think there's going to be a big market in the future for rendering to all sorts of screens, you know, on your toasters or whatever, I don't know, your shoes. I'm making this up now, but you get the idea. And the fact that there is no good one-size-fits-all rendering library for that.
Yeah, what it is I do need mobile support, like one of my other use cases is like a kiosk type of thing.
Mhm.
Sometimes the tablet's not enough horsepower.
Right, so you want to do mobile, but you also want, well, I mentioned AppTree, it's the same thing. They're mostly, people use it on mobile, but they also use it on the web. And in that case, you know, most of their code is the same, but they're not using Flutter on the web, but they're sharing the code between it. And they wrote a really good article on that, on how they did the software so that it would be able to be shared. So that's a good thing for you to look up. It's called Why We Chose Flutter and How It Changed Our Company Entirely, or something like that.
Yep. Okay, so good APIs for integration tests, unit tests. So you can see what the pixels are. You can see what widgets got drawn, all sorts of wonderful stuff. And good interoperation with the APIs, and you can make your own plugins to connect to the system, to connect to third-party SDKs. There's a headless test runner for running tests on Windows, Linux, and Mac. And command line tools for creating, building, testing, and compiling. And there's already the equivalent of Perl CPAN called the pub, getting more and more packages every day. So it's a reusable place. The tooling all understands stuff that's up in pub and understands how to bring it down and add it to your application. Very smart.
And I don't think it's a coincidence that pub implies beer also. So.
Yes, or darts. Okay. What about editors? Google builds plugins, so they're fully supported for IntelliJ IDEA, Android Studio, and just recently VS Code. The one in VS Code is the one I'm going to be demonstrating today. Fully integrated development experience. It's got IntelliSense, it's got code completion, all sorts of wonderful things, right? And the IntelliJ works for both the paid version and the free versions. Or you don't have to do that. You could just use any editor that can edit text files, although
We have people using Vim.
Yeah. People use Vim just in general. Okay, anyway, or the command line Flutter tool, so you can do that. So for example, people can use Atom, Emacs. There are some plugins for some of those that give you some of the code completion stuff, but really you want to stick with one of the supported ones. And so VS Code actually started as a third-party plugin. A guy worked on it for about 6 months, And then it sort of became official. So that's
Well,
going.
he had a day job, but he was working on this in his own time. So we actually made a deal with him and the company he worked for. So he's working for us for a year to really soup that up.
Right.
So,
And currently, because of Apple's requirements, you have to run on a Mac in order to deploy to the iOS store. And that means you have to have Xcode for some pieces of this. And so if you're going to do iOS, you have to have a Mac. But that was true anyway. Android requires...
Right,
yeah, sorry.
yeah, let me say two things about that.
Yeah.
That's because of Apple. Apple requires you to sign your apps through Xcode. There are services, cloud services, that you can ship an app up to, and they'll sign it for you. So you don't actually have to own a Mac, but it,
Get a
somehow
Mac.
it has to go through a Mac before you can do an iOS app.
Right. And the Android, of course, can work on Mac, Windows, and Linux. There are Flutter tool or plugins, invoke the compilers directly. As you'll see in a few moments, I'm never going to go up to the command line to build my current project. It just runs. And typically, no need then to learn the vendor tools except to learn how to deploy it or how to build plugins. That's really the only two times you'll need to know that.
Right.
So Flutter was inspired by React and React Native. It was designed to be layered and customizable, and every one of those boxes from a few pages ago, totally optional. Developers can use the selected parts or a completely different framework if they want. You can create widgets from scratch or customize the existing ones, but there's already like 100 widgets that ship in the box. Ship in the box? That doesn't make any sense. All right.
There's a lot more than 100.
Well, okay, more than 100. There we go. The widget layout, because of the way it's designed, the reactive design, is single pass, and it's fast enough that scrolling is actually live. As you start scrolling a list view, the widgets that come off the top just get disposed of, and new ones get created, so it doesn't have to store all that later.
Yeah, I also want to point out that the scrolling, there's no special code for scrolling. We do scrolling with the layout. That's how fast the layout is.
Yep.
Right? And that's really hard to do because, when you're scrolling stuff with your finger, if that thing doesn't track exactly with your finger, it kind of makes you dizzy, right? So the layout's really fast.
Yep. I'll just leave those last three bullets off in the interest of time. So how does Flutter run on the platform? So on the Android, the C++ code is compiled with the NDK. On iOS, of course, the C++ code is compiled with the LLVM. The Dart code for deployment is ahead of time compiled. This is where it gets converted to native ARM code. And there's all sorts of wonderful things that happen during that, like tree shaking. You only get the code you use instead of getting the entire library, so it makes for much smaller apps. But when we're developing, we don't want to wait for a full AOT pass. So there's actually a jitter VM that we use for development, and it's very, very fast, as you'll see in a minute. There is no, sorry?
No, that's one of the reasons we use Dart, because Dart was designed by a bunch of people. The people working on the Dart team included the guy who invented the V8 compiler, all right? And a bunch of people working on low-level Chrome stuff and things like that. So they actually they designed a language that could be very quickly and efficiently both AOT compiled and JIT compiled. So you use one when you're doing development and one for release, and that makes it really nice.
And as we said earlier, no VM, no JVM is involved. It's all native ARM code, right?
Right.
OEM widgets, again, are not used. Instead, the widgets are all native Dart code, so they're exposed. This also gives them higher performance, better binding to the rest of the Dart code, and better look across platform. Again, coded in open source, patchable, subclassable, understandable, inspirational. You can go in and if you're trying to figure out how to do something, you can go and look at a similar kind of widget and go, oh, I see how the animation works for that. And consistent behavior on all phones, all OS versions. You don't need compat libraries to ship to older phones.
Yeah.
It's all Dart all the way up and down with the appropriate shim. And so I think we said this already. No, I didn't. You can ship, did I say that already?
Which one?
This bullet. Did I say that already? Yeah, we talked about that already. Never mind. Okay.
Yeah.
Right, whatever. So why Dart? The Google mobile team chose Dart based on two critical features. Again, like you said this a moment ago.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. You saw the slides before, that's why.
Yeah.
So a JIT-based fast development cycle and then an AOT compiler that emits native code. You can also reuse some of the code in pub. So people are writing Dart for desktop apps. They're writing Dart for server-side apps. And a lot of it doesn't depend on HTML or mirrors. And that's the only two things that aren't also available in Flutter.
Smoke and mirrors.
Yep, smoke and mirrors, there we go.
And by the way, so with the beta release, I also wrote an article that's out there called Why Flutter Uses Dart. So if you're curious about why we picked Dart rather than your favorite language, you can read that, and it goes into quite a bit of technical detail.
And again, in the interest of quickly getting to the demo,
Yeah.
I'm going to the next slide. Okay, hot reload. This is revolutionary. Sub-second reload times on the hard device or on an emulator. I'll be having an emulator up here today. What's interesting about this hot reload is it's stateful. It actually retains the application state during a reload. This,
Yeah,
go
so
ahead.
if you're like 5 windows, views down into an app or something like that, and you're making changes, it stays there. You don't have to go back down.
And it works by injecting the updated source code into the running Dart VM. You can add new classes, methods, and fields. We don't really care about this. I'm just going to keep skipping past this because if you're going to be using Flutter, you'll eventually read this. Okay, for some things you need to do a full reload, but this is also very fast, as I will demonstrate.
Yeah, we'll show that too.
Yeah, okay, so we're going to stop the presentation for a second, and we're going to pray to the demo gods. Let's see.
Is everybody invoking?
Yes.
So what he's going to do, he's going to show off actually coding with this. He's going to be using VS Code, as we mentioned. He's going to be using the iOS simulator. You could also use the Android emulator. You can also just plug either one of those into it and use it.
There's my simulator.
Phones, so you could plug an Android phone. And actually, when I work, I often will have both the iOS simulator and an actual Android phone side by side, and I can see them both. But it turns out that
If you can't see this, move forward, because that's how big it's going to get.
Yeah.
I can't make it any bigger.
that's as big as it gets.
Yeah, it's as big as it gets. So when you build a new application with Flutter, there's a command line tool that lets you create a brand new application.
Well, the IDE says.
The ID does too, yeah, but it's calling the same thing underneath. So it creates an application that looks exactly like this. This is what it generates.
We'll show them what it looks like.
Oh, what, running?
Yeah, pull up the emulator.
No, it's not running yet.
Oh,
Not
sorry.
running yet. Oh, he's getting ahead. He's
Okay.
getting ahead. He forgot everything we talked about at the table.
I know.
Okay, so the only thing that's different when you say create a project is there'll be a bunch of comments in here, but you don't need the comments, they just take up space, and I am the commenter, so that'll be fun.
Yeah, so he ripped out all the comments, but other than that, this is the app that you get.
This is the exact app
when
you get.
say create a new project.
It should look somewhat familiar. This is Dart code. If you've done Java or C#, it looks a lot like this, and a lot of the same things apply. So I'm going to press a button, and it's going to start the build from this, because we're coming in cold, it has to build it from scratch. So let's hope this works.
Right, and the fact that I thought that the emulator was already running is really bad, because I was the one that told him, well, show them how slow
Okay,
it
wait.
is normally.
So note the amount of time. I just push the button. Note the amount of time before we get the app actually up and running.
Right.
Okay, so it's launching that. I found my iPhone 6s simulator. Let me actually go over to the simulator. I don't care about that. There we go. Okay, I went out and got coffee.
So this is your life if you're writing a native app.
Right.
Normally. How many people have written native apps? So
You're used to this
Tell
time.
us if we're lying about this.
Yeah, it was about, what, a minute and a half? And that's also your iteration cycle. You make one change.
It's up.
Okay, right, and it's already up. You make one change and you wait that amount of time again and again and again and again. Am I freaking anybody out? Yeah, that's what happens, right? That's why I didn't want to start that. So here is the actual app. So what we have here is a little text message in the middle.
You probably can't read that, but
Yeah.
it says, you have pushed this button this many times.
Right. Okay, and that just means this little a floating action button, FAB, here in the corner, fab, okay. I press that, 1, 2, 3, right, pretty fast.
I don't really like this color scheme though. Can you fix that?
Yeah, I don't like blue, let's make it orange. So now we're going back into the code. Let me push this down here. We're going back into the code, and we're going to find where the blue is.
Keep going up.
Okay. Okay, see it says colors blue, right? And look, as I mouse over, I have full IntelliSense. I get support from the IDE. I'm going to get rid of that blue, if I can type. And I'm going to see what else I can put in there. Boy, just every color in the world. Well, let's just say orange. I think there's an orange in there. Okay, code completion. Got that. Now, trouble is I can't put them both up at the same time. Okay, here we go. I'm saving the file. It's changed. It didn't have to go through that minute and a half cycle again.
In fact, you can't see it. At the bottom, it should say how long it took to reload.
Oh, that's good. Turn it off.
You turned that off?
I had to hide it for a second.
559 milliseconds.
Yeah, half a second to get you back to productive again.
Right. And that includes the fact that it's at the same state. Notice Well, if he puts the thing up again, you can see the counter is still sitting at 3.
The counter stayed the same, so the state was maintained even though the application had modifications made to it.
Right.
Okay, so just for fun, I'll change that word demo up at the top. So I'm going to scroll back, oh, that's here. And I'm going to close that. I'm going to put scale, S-C-A-L-E, 16x, demo, okay? And again, I save it. Already done.
Yeah, we can't even get the emulator fast enough.
Yeah,
right?
I can't get back to the thing. Okay. Well, this is sort of fun, but I like this plus button, but where's the minus button? How do I decrement?
How many people want a minus button?
Oh, first let me...
Okay.
Okay, right. So let me first change this text so that it just says count is 7, right?
Okay.
So that'll make it bigger too. So we're going to go up here. We're going to adjust. We're going to rip out... where's that text? There it is. We're going to rip this out.
Which one?
The top. Oh, no, we don't.
No,
not
you
that
got
one.
this one.
Okay, right.
There you go.
All right, that's this. All right, yes, okay, so we're just going to rip this out. By the way, the grayed out comments are automatically being added by the editor. They're not part of the source file. It computes what widget you're in and annotates it for you.
Yeah, you can. See the little ones at the closing brackets? So it's telling you what you're actually closing.
And again, I'm even changing something that's referring to that value, right? So you think, well, now it has to redo it, right? So, sorry, what?
No. That's just showing the closing bracket and what
Yep.
it's closing.
Okay, so
That's
one,
actually an IDE thing. That's not.
yeah, and you can turn that off if you want. Okay, so again, I'm saving, and I'm bringing up counter is. It's already done. Imagine the iteration cycle. You can be sitting next to your designer, and he could say, that word should be this.
Yeah, that's
Or
not
that
how it
button should be
happens,
that.
though.
Yeah.
After about 20 minutes, the designer grabs the keyboard and starts like typing stuff themselves.
Yeah, all right, so what the next thing I'm going to do, and by the way, those are all under half-second reloads. You know you can't always tell. So what I want to do is I want to put a minus button next to this plus button. I want to put it in a column. So I got to create a column.
Wow, it looks yellow on this screen.
Yeah, it's orange.
on this
It's
one.
ugly orange.
Trust it, it's orange over here.
Okay, so that's it right there. Okay, so I want to come in here, and I want to create a new column. Oh wait, is there a comma in there? Hopefully there is. Yeah, okay. New column. And notice I get completion help, so I can tell what's going on. So on a new column, and we're going to have children. And what I'm going to do is bring this down. I'm going to take my FAB, which is right here.
It's fab.
Oh, I put it in the wrong place, darn it. Well, then I can fix that.
How many people know what a fab is?
Oh, let me undo a
Done
bunch.
any Android coding, I'm sure.
Undo. There we
Floating
go.
action button because it appears to float.
It needs to be here.
It's that little round button that you see in a lot of apps nowadays.
New, oh, I had it in the wrong place. It needs to go after this.
Yeah.
New column,
Yeah.
and I'm going to see my children again. Okay, children, widget children, and I'm going to turn that into return. Now I'm going to take my FAB. See, I even made a mistake, and I was able to use undo to fix it. Okay, we
And he
put,
should have shown you that also, because if you make a mistake, like there's an error in it, and you try to run it, the emulator shows the error message in the emulator, which is really nice. And then you can go fix the error, and it continues as if there was no error. So you don't even have to restart the app if there's an error, which is really, really nice, because
Yep.
I make lots of errors. Right?
and at this point, all I've done is add a column, because I'm going to put 2 widgets in that corner instead of just 1. Okay, so now I save it. Oops, that's not save. Save it. Okay, and I go back to the simulator. Oh, where'd my button go?
So can you see it?
It's way up here in the corner on the right.
You created a column, and it's up at the top.
The column is the whole right-hand edge now. And the default for columns is early, not late. Towards the beginning, not towards the end.
So how do you fix that?
So how do I fix that? So I need to go back up here to my column, right here, and I'm going to add, well, let's see, what else does it know how to do? So I'm looking here, and I see, how do I get up to that? I can do it here
We're
now.
not used to doing this on such a
Yeah,
low
so I see
resolution.
main axis alignment. Now, if I had the docs, I could look at the docs, but it looks like it'll take a main axis alignment. So let me add that. Axis alignment right there.
Yeah.
And it wants a main axis alignment, and I know that that is, it's a class method for this, so main axis alignment, dot, and see, there's center, end, and start, and it defaults to start. You could have seen that if we were on a smaller screen, or a
Let's
bigger
try
screen. Okay, so let's do center. Okay, so now, again, save, tab over. Well, now it's halfway down, so obviously that's controlling the position, right? Now we know that that's there. Okay, now let's do end, because I really want it back in that corner again. Look, there it is.
There it is.
Does it still work? By the way, our counter's already still maintaining state all the way through this.
Right.
So I'm fiddling with stuff. I'm getting about a half a second reload time. I could just paint with this. There is no prototyping tool for Dart or for Flutter. You just use Flutter. It is fast enough to be its own prototyper. Okay, let's add a second button.
And the nice thing about that is that you could have a prototyping tool, but it wouldn't be able to handle like complex animations and stuff like that. This does everything. You can just try it out immediately.
So I'm just going to start by copy pasting the code, save that. And now look, there we go. 2 plus buttons, right? And they both go plus, right? Well, I don't want them to both say plus. I want the one on the top to be minus. Well, I know that the icon for that is remove. And there's catalogs of all the icon stuff, but I had to look this up. You'd think it'd be minus. But look, okay, good, that's good.
But it still adds.
It's still adding, huh?
That's not
So
working very
that didn't change it. We didn't change behavior, we just changed look just for now. So how do I do that?
That's
Well,
next year. We'll have it so it automatically figures
yeah,
out
right,
what you want.
right. So notice this call to increment counter. That's where the business must be happening, right? So I scroll up here, and there's this little thing here, so it's this little subroutine, increment counter. And I'm going to copy that, paste it. Oh, I didn't copy it, I just highlighted it. Copy, paste, and don't worry about set state and stuff. That's all stuff you'll eventually learn. And we're just going to change plus plus to minus minus.
And the name.
Oh, yes, right, can't have, that's why the little red squigglies, right? There we go.
Yeah. Like you got 2 of those.
Decrement counter, right? So now it should work, right? Let's go see.
Nah.
I didn't change the code, I didn't
These
change the
guys are
binding, did I?
smart.
Yeah, smart. In fact, there's a little green squiggle that says, this isn't actually used.
Yeah, it says.
So that would have been my clue there. So let's go ahead and change this. And again, code completion, see? But it will try to call it there. We only want to pass the method name. So we'll do this, save this, back over. What do you think?
Yay.
Isn't that cool?
Yeah, but I don't like the column. It looks ugly.
Well, the column looks ugly, but I also want to change the colors on the buttons. Let's do that first.
Let's do that. Yeah.
Because I don't want it all orange. I really just want a red minus and a green plus. Let's get nice with that, right? So what we're going to do is go in here, and if we look at the new for floating action button, we see that, you can't see it, but there's a background color method here. So we're going to just add background color, and it needs a colors. We did this before, so color's red, right? And then let's do the background color here. Out of the way. All right, background color, colors green.
You guys can see the autocomplete and all that stuff happening, right? Okay.
All right, I save it, back over, look at that. Look at that. Okay, we've got the functionality, but it's ugly. It's still ugly because I actually don't like them on top of each other. I actually want it to go across. Can I go across? Sure, just change column to row. Done. Okay? It's too tight though. See, I need some white space around them. That looks a little too ugly. So to fix this, I'm actually going to go in and create a little helper method. I want to put a widget called padding around both of them, but I want it to be exactly the same. So I'm just going to create a little helper subroutine, come up here.
So while he's doing that, I want you to notice that everything in Flutter, is a widget. Like, you don't add padding as an option on each thing. You actually have a padding widget, right? And center works the same way. Center is really nice because you can put anything inside center and it will center it. You know, how many people have tried to center something in HTML, right? Okay, so we made everything a widget, so it's always really clear. And each widget only does that one thing, and it does it well. And so you compose them together to make, you know, to do larger things. And because all that code is in your app, I mean, he hasn't done it yet, but you can actually just click on some widget name like padding and say, show me the source code for it. And there's the source, and you can edit the source code.
Okay, it looks like I need a edge insets geometry. So I'm going to do edge insets, and I know it happens to be edge insets, so I'm not going to look it up in the documentation. But I want to get, I want to get one of those.
All.
Got all? Why is it like this?
I don't know.
Oh, it's not padding, it's decoration? No, what is it? Add padding, key padding, widget, child. Oh, I didn't do cap W, that doesn't help, okay. There we go. No, that has to be lowercase widget. Oh, I knew we were gonna blow this, right?
Child, widget is child.
Oh, child, right, there we go. Oh, yeah, eventually. That's adding padding, right. So why is this not working here?
We should have a little bear, right?
Edge insets, dot, oh, how come it's not right?
I don't think it's padding. I don't think this is not.
Oh, maybe that's not it. Oh, that's probably size or something.
Yeah.
It would be easier to see if I could actually see all this scrolling. That's padding, see? Padding.
Huh.
It's worked before. Yeah, it needs an edge insets geometry.
Yeah.
It is case sensitive. Did I get a case wrong? Okay.
Keep typing. Come on. Insets. Geometry. Right there it is.
No, that's not it. This is not completing right.
What are we doing wrong?
I know.
Okay, it's returning a widget, add padding, takes a widget child, yeah. And
Is it new? Oh, new! That's what I always forget. Right. There we go. All right. And let's just start with.
I forgot it because
8 screen pixels.
starting in about a couple of weeks, new is going to be optional and you can leave it off. So,
Yeah.
That's why.
All right. So now I have this thing called add padding. Now, if we look back at the original, we didn't change anything, so it's still got the ugly buttons there, right? So what I need to do is go down here. I always forget that new on that one. It's like crazy stuff.
You did that earlier.
I know.
Remember.
So what we're going to do is right in front of here,
Which is why we're making it optional.
I was going to make, I'm going to do add padding, and we're going to pass this FAB that I'm creating. And so remember, I'm returning a widget and take a widget. So that's going to effectively be accumulation on this. Okay? And actually, if you look at it now, oh!
You only did one of
I
them.
only did one of them, so I'm going to do them, I think both of them here.
So while he's doing this, so I mentioned that new is going to be optional. Same thing for const. It's going to figure out anything that it can make a constant, which is really nice. So you don't have to specify that anymore. And the beta there is a beta release now. It's an early beta release, and you can actually use that stuff in it, but you have to turn that on explicitly. Yeah.
There we go, another nice new one.
The new and constant, that's a feature of Dart. So Dart is being upgraded to Dart 2, and it has a lot of new features, but the one that we talk about, just because everybody seems to love it, which is not, I mean, it's because of the type inferencing. We can also figure out whether something's a constructor or not and get rid of new. And we can also figure out what are constants and make those.
Okay, everything's wired up, we're running out of time, so everything's wired up, but I don't think I like that orange. Let's do one more change to it. And I can
What
also,
color do you want?
I can also tweak the spaces too. Yellow, okay. Watch, this is live. I can go ahead and change this to 20, or not 200, no.
Ooh.
That'd be really bad. And it has to be a floating point number. So there's that. And so I could sit there and tweak with my designer. I could take a, maybe you want a little less or a little more. Okay, well,
We were having fun earlier.
Yeah.
You can actually make them so that they're spaced out evenly across the bottom. There's like all these options you can do. So
right, yeah.
anyway, we don't need to show them.
Okay, and let's go ahead and make it, who called yellow, was it? Okay.
Yeah, so before it was orange and it looked yellow, so maybe if we make it yellow, it'll be orange, right? No.
It's about the same. There we go.
That's really yellow, yeah.
All right, now, all these times I was using the hot reload. There are times when that doesn't work and you have to do a full reload. But here we go, we're going to do it.
So the times, mostly it's when you have a static variable, because those don't get reloaded, they're not part of a module.
Notice the full reload actually started the app from the beginning, but I didn't have that minute and a half of compile time again.
Right.
I completely pushed my code.
How long did that,
It was like a second.
what? Well, it actually is being recompiled, because when it reloads that thing, it's using the JIT compiler. So before it can run it, it actually has to JIT compile each thing. And it was how much?
It was about a second. Oh, let's look.
He's going to display that.
Yeah, a little slightly less than a second.
981 milliseconds to do a full read.
And if I had changed the source code, then hit that button, it would have compiled it.
What? No. It only goes in
We're going to have to hold the questions till the end. I still got a few more slides.
Yeah.
Okay, well, actually, you can talk while I'm switching it back.
All right.
I said you can talk while I'm switching it back.
Yeah, so the JIT compiler, I mean, it reloads the stuff, but anything it runs, it has to go ahead and JIT compile. So that, when you do a full reload, it's reloading all those things. Right, it reloads them and compiles them, and it comes up. Any module. So you could have even changed part of the Flutter library and it would have reloaded that pass. They gave us, they featured our app. They liked it, you know.
Okay.
They don't have any problem with native code apps.
Okay, we're back up? We're back up, yeah, okay. All right, so what does it run on? Jelly Bean or more? iOS 8 or better, but it has to be a 64-bit device for now.
And by the way, those limitations are arbitrary. I could go back further. So far, nobody's asked us for it.
You can run live devices. This could have all been done on my phone, except I don't have the licenses for that yet. And Google tests on a variety of phones. Doesn't test on tablets, though, but well, you can certainly test it on a tablet. And it is possible to embed a Flutter view into an existing iOS or Android app, although the documentation is lacking right now. Desktop and web apps are not on the roadmap, but third parties are actually working on desktop apps. We see it occasionally get notices on Pub. So you have out-of-the-box access to platform-specific services, but it's not intended as a lowest common denominator. So there are specific differences depending on what platform you're on.
He mentioned the Hamilton app before. If you want to see somebody going, absolutely far out with this stuff, in Hamilton, they didn't want something that looked like a normal app. They wanted to have their own look. They wanted a branded feel. And they got it in less than 3 months. So
yeah, amazing. You can extend widgets. You can customize widgets. Widgets are all built from smaller widgets, obviously. So, for example, a raised button is actually a material wrapper and a gesture detector. And the material gives the look, and the gesture detector gives you the interaction. So you can add gesture detection to any widget that you see. Composition then gives you the maximum control. Also allows for an increased amount of code reuse. So if you find yourself reusing or retyping or cutting and pasting a section of code over and over again, like I could have made that FAB be a separate class and just called that. So I wouldn't have all those extra details there. Many material widgets aren't just the material widget as in the catalog. They're actually decomposed so you can mix and match the stuff behind it. And you can interact with the platform. It integrates with Java and Kotlin code on Android, Objective-C and Swift on iOS. It uses a very flexible message passing style so that you're sending messages back and forth down to the native code. And you can use same API for both platforms. Of course, specific per platform has to be written using plugins. It does have support for concurrency. Isolates in Dart provide separate heaps in the VM, so you can be able to run that in parallel, usually implemented as system threads.
somebody was asking me earlier that if you could do background tasks, and that's how you do those.
Yeah. Again, no shared memory parallelism. There's no locks. It's all share nothing with mailboxes to get back and forth. Okay. You can also run the code on the Android while the app is in the background, but the iOS can't do that at this point. So the app stops when it goes to the background. Now, you noticed I was coding to make the layout. There's no markup syntax because Google finds this approach to have more flexibility. Because if you have a rigid markup language, then it's harder to get custom widgets, custom behaviors. You're basically stuck with whatever the markup syntax already has. And code first works better now for hot reload. You saw how quickly I was changing the layout. Why do I need a prototyper? Why do I need to jump out to an XML editor? It's all just Dart code. And that way we can refactor to break up complex objects or reuse the parts in other ways. Again, it's just code. And it is possible. Dart has tooling that can do pre-processing and then generate the code. So you could actually make a markup language if you wanted and make it custom for yourself. Again, GitHub has an open issue tracker. You can go there and complain and things will be fixed, or you can suggest new things. Stack Overflow is the primary place for how-to type questions. There's a mailing list for more detailed discussions, although there really hasn't been much on there lately. They've all been using Gitter.
No, we put stuff up.
Okay. So a very, very active Gitter channel. I try to catch up, and then I go away for about 10 minutes, and it's got 100 more messages. It is like drinking from the fire hose there. But it also means
This is because of the beta announcement.
Yeah. But that also means,
kind of going crazy
yeah,
right now.
that also means that Google people are often hanging out there. So you get your questions answered right from the source. Again, it's all open source, very relaxed license. I think it's like Apache or MIT or something.
It's MIT.
MIT, right? And again,
And no patent.
yes. And it's the bulk of the work is still being done by Google, but again, a very active community. So let me summarize, because I'm running out of time. So Flutter has the advantages of reactive views, but not the hassle of JavaScript. I keep telling you, I said,
Yeah,
JavaScript.
you're so mean to JavaScript.
I know.
I don't know why.
It's fast, it's smooth, it's predictable. The code compiles ahead of time to native ARM code. The developer, again, full control over the widgets and layout. Comes with beautiful customizable widgets. I mean, that app that I just built, right? That looked pretty good, right? Except when we had it orange, right? Great developer tools, amazing hot reload, better than anybody else in the industry, I would have to say. More performant, more compatibility, more fun. And by the way,
I added the fun part.
yes, by the way, yes, you can develop for both iOS and Android from one code base.
Right.
But that's insignificant compared to the other 6 bullets. That's why Wim wanted me to retitle the talk.
Yeah.
That's really not the story. The
Because
story
the
is
fact that it
everything.
runs on, I mean, it's embarrassing that other ones don't run on multiple platforms, right? I mean, you don't think, oh, I'm writing this Unix app. Well, is it going to be running on, you know, a large computer or a little desktop thing or a Raspberry Pi or something like that? You don't think like that anymore. And it's about time that we stop thinking that way for mobile.
The doc site, flutter.io, the docs on there, the intro to Flutter, all very understandable, readable, some of the best tech documentation I've seen for a beta product.
Yeah.
So it's really, really good stuff for that. So that's my last slide.
Let me actually add one thing that he didn't really talk about.
Okay.
So that app, we were just doing it on an iOS emulator. But we actually could have done it on an Android emulator, and it would actually have looked different, okay? It would have followed, like when you do scrolling, now we didn't have any scrolling in that app, so can't demo that, but we could fire up another one. If you stick around, we'll show you some of that stuff. But like, you know how scrolling works on iOS versus Android. On iOS, it bounces when you get to the end, and on Android, you get this blue shade thing that comes up. It does that automatically. It switches between them depending on which platform you're on. And in fact, you can even fool it. Like, there's an app you can download called the Flutter Gallery. And right now, you can only get it from the Google Play Store because Apple will not allow demo apps in their store. But when you fire it up, tap on the menu, and you can tell it, pretend you're on an iOS phone, and you'll suddenly have an iOS app. And it will have all the behaviors of an iOS app. It'll have the different icons that Apple uses and so forth. So you can do that, and that's also nice because if you're testing an app and you don't have an iOS phone, you can just test it on your Android phone and tell it, pretend like you're an iOS phone, and you can see what it looks like. So there's all sorts of cute little things you can do like that. Before I take the questions, are you done?
Yeah, I'm done. And I just wanted to say, in spite of the fact that the demo sort of took a little bit longer than I was planning, we got all the way through the slide deck too, and that was important. So,
Yeah.
yay.
So before we get into any questions at all, I just want to tell you, we're going to hang out here for a while, and even if they kick us out for the last talk, we'll hang out outside and stuff like that. But you had a question, yeah?
With the hot reload, do I have to worry about any sort of security issues when someone's running my Flutter app? A developer gets a hold of the phone, somebody else's phone, plugs it into the laptop via the USB port, loads up Flutter, and hot reloads your app.
No, the code for hot reload is nowhere near the phone application. Once it's installed, it's AOT, doesn't have the jitter or with the VM.
Yeah.
On my developer, yeah.
No, you can do
it
it on
your
a live phone.
Your phone, yeah.
Well, you plug your phone in, you can do that, right?
So I grab somebody else's phone that's already running my Flutter app.
No, that's deployed now. There's no.
Yeah, there's no way to move it or anything like
Yeah.
that, yeah. I don't
Lots of
think that's a
questions.
big issue, yeah.
No, security concern. It's just
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I understand what you're asking, but I'm,
no, that's good. That's the answer.
Yeah.
well, I hate answering security concerns by saying, no, you can't do that, because, you know, that's.
Somebody will.
Somebody's gonna figure out how to do it. But yeah, this doesn't seem like one of those. Yeah, also, you realize that when you're doing hot reload, I mean, it's just JIT compiling it and stuff like that. Before you would want to ship this thing, you would want to AOT compile it, right? So, in the worst case, they could get your app, they wouldn't get any of your data, and it wouldn't perform very well. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, and I love talking about the fact that, yeah, no, that's the hot reload, yeah, but that's when it's in bad performance mode, yeah. So,
React Native state management is done for Redux and MobX. How is sophisticated state management done in CI?
well, that's one of the areas where we've probably emulated React Native too well. There are currently about 7 different versions of Redux for Flutter that have been written by different people. There's actually, there's 2 of them that are real, and the reason why we say 2 is that there's one that uses this thing called built model that allows you to build immutable data structures a lot easier, and it's really nice. But some people like the regular Redux one. But yeah, no, there's Redux. Dart comes with streams. There's also an RX Dart, so a lot of the people use RX Dart for building data models. And if you want, you can build a purely imperative one. So now, having said all that, I don't think that's good enough. personally. We have too many options. We don't really have a lot of guidance. We like what Android did with the architecture components and stuff like that. So this is something that we're paying a lot of attention to. But right now, I mean, initially they were focused more on how do you create the view and not the data model. And now, you know, through several people, including me kicking and screaming, they're paying more attention to the data model stuff. And there has been a lot of good work. There's actually a website called To Do MVC. What is it? Oh, no, I can't remember the full name of it. Anyway, it's done by Brian Egan, and he's taken the to-do list and he's implemented it in every possible data architecture you could, and so you can look at those and see how you would do it, and that's really helpful. There was also a talk by Gavin Dowdy at ReactiveConf in Bratislava just a few months ago, where he did the same thing. He took an app, he did it imperatively, and then he said, here, now let's do it with streams. Now let's do it with Stream Builder. Now let's do it with RxArc. Now let's do it with Redis. And it's really awesome to watch. So any of those things are really good. So there is a lot of material out there, but I think we can do better. So.
We need to take questions offline now, so we're out of our time. So thank you very much. Thank you very much.